last show. And he came up and is working for a cable access channel and might
Words
do something
and
on
Stuff is the
Porchlight.
name of it. It premieres in July.
Yeah. And he's a journalist. He used to work for the people for the United Way, right? Do I have it right? He's like, I'll tell him all about it. Please welcome Carter Page. Sorry.
So about 10 years ago, I was living in Washington, D.C. with my then girlfriend, Sarah. And Sarah and I had met in high school. We were friends back then, but both of us were, we were attracted to each other, but each of us was, far too neurotic and shy to actually do anything about it. So fast forward about 12 years later, and I'm working and living in Washington, D.C. I'm working for the United Negro College Fund, and she had gone to law school and was a civil liberties attorney for an organization we've all heard of and hopefully support. And, we sort of got reacquainted, started dating again, found out we had a lot in common, and eventually moved in together with no real plans for the future, but, just save money on rent, really. And one of the things that I found out we had in common was that during college, both of us had worked in restaurants in various functions. Sarah had cooked. She was a line cook, a prep cook. In fact, she had enrolled in CIA, Culinary Institute of America, and dropped out to go to law school, of all things. And I did pretty much the same except for the, culinary school part. And we loved to cook for each other, cook for our friends, our family. So around Thanksgiving, we decided that we were going to host my family for Thanksgiving because hers was in Florida. And, we're talking about what we're going to cook. And Sarah mentioned that she was going to cook the collard greens. And like our other two storytellers, I had trouble saying no. It didn't occur to me at that time that, the cooking of the collard greens in my family is a huge ritual. It's a staple of Southern cooking, and it's sort of like the bread and wine of soul food. And my family, my mom, my aunt, and my cousin, they spend the entire day in the kitchen cooking. And one of the things that they, put a lot of care into was the collard greens. And I grew up with them, and I hated them. I hated the bitter taste. I hated the smell when they were cooking. I hated the fat back. And I have an uncle who has two nicknames. He's known as Uncle Cool for obvious reasons, and he's also known as Uncle Tender. And I won't get into that. That's another story right there. But Uncle Cool would always say that you can have collard greens without soul, but you can't have soul without collard greens. So, growing up, I since I hated collard greens, I wondered if I had soul, And, the fact that Sarah was going to cook the collard greens really made me wonder because, my family loved and, Sarah's great, She was very popular with my family. And the fact that she was Jewish had nothing to do with it until Thanksgiving. When she decided to cook the collard greens. So, the entire week leading up to Thanksgiving, I am a complete wreck. Not only are we hosting Thanksgiving, not only is my Jewish girlfriend cooking the collard greens for my very, very soulful family, but the Cowboys are playing the Redskins, and, I'm from that area, and I'm a big Redskins fan. And my brother keeps calling me every day to sort of heckle me, to play agent provocateur. He was like Flavor Flav in Public Enemy. He would call me up and say, stand back to do this. Yo, Negro, what's up with the collard greens? And then he would say, you can't make no collard greens without no Dan Doodle. And my brother's a very educated man, you know. He's a stockbroker, an economist, but, you know, we all go there on occasion. And to explain, Dan Doodle is a southern dish that my Aunt Annabelle used to make. It involves taking chitlins, familiar with that, heard of them, pig guts, opening them up, stuffing them with ham, and then deep frying them. It's good eating, though, I'm telling you. So, yeah, you know, Chucky's playing Flavor Flav. I'm completely and totally stressed out. And, you know, something else that I bring to the table personally is that was and then and am now a recovering alcoholic. So, I mean, I have family to be stressed out about, my brother, my girlfriend, the Redskins, and, you know, it all comes to a head on Thanksgiving Day when my family starts to arrive. All of the love and affection that my mom had for Sarah, it seemed like it didn't even exist anymore. You know, it was almost as if I wasn't a member of the family. And, I mean, so it's just very tense. And, of course, Sarah knows none of this because you know, she doesn't need to know it, you know. I mean, she's going to cook a great meal. We're going to cook a great meal, and we proceed to do that. And the game's going on, and the Redskins are losing, and Chucky is popping his head in the kitchen with Flavor Flavisms. And Chucky and I decided that, you know, the barometer as to whether or not the collard greens were up to an acceptable level is a question that my Uncle Cool asked after he, you know, takes a couple of tastes of something. He will say something, you know, to the effect of, girl, these are good. What you do, put your toes in them? And so... So we sit down for dinner, you know, we say various prayers, the food is served, it's a beautiful meal. And, you know, actually right before the food was served, things were, well, I'm getting tense telling you this, just reliving it, but it was just so incredibly tense in at least my own little world, you know, in between my ears, that I'm in the kitchen with Sarah, and I look up in the cabinet, and there's a bottle of Grand Marnier that one of my cousins had bought there. And, you know, I mean, I look at it, and I'm thinking, you know, I could get away with just one, you know? I could do this. I could really get away with it. And then I looked over at Sarah, and I'm like, you know, that would just be, I mean, it just wasn't worth it. And, yeah, so I continued cooking, and we served the meal after I had that moment. And we sit down to eat, and Chucky and I are looking at Uncle Cool, waiting for the signal. And sure enough, hey, Sarah, girl, what you do? Put your toes in these collard greens? These good. Chucky and I, you know, break out laughing. My mom smiles during the meal, which means that she approves. And the Cowboys lose, no, actually the Redskins lose to the Cowboys 21-10. But, you know, I got through that day with my family intact. You know, Sarah didn't leave. At least not then. She left. She left a year later. But it was a good time. A few years after that, maybe about 4 or 5 years after that, I'm at my mom's house for Thanksgiving again. I'm there in the morning, early in the morning, which I'm usually not, and the phone rings. I pick it up, and it's Sarah, who I hadn't spoken to in a few years. And, you know, we catch up, and then I ask the obvious question, you know, what are you doing calling my mom? And she said, well, you know, I've spoken to your mom like every Thanksgiving for the last few years. What for? Well, you know, she called me because she wanted to get my recipe for the collard greens. But she, you know, had never made them, you know, had never used Sarah's recipe, and Sarah was returning her call again. So that day, we had collard greens with Fresno chili peppers, garlic, and olive oil that were steamed very lightly so they still had their texture. Those are my favorite collard greens and the only collard greens I eat. I got soul. Thanks.